Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by two people I am very thankful for on this Thanksgiving week, Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap in the house. How you guys doing heading into at least two of our favorite holiday? I'm not sure about Cody.
Put me on the spot. Is Thanksgiving a top 2 holiday? I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Easily. Come on now. It's filled with food and football. What more do you need for a holiday?
I mean,
Yeah, but
Christmas is going to be nice this year, too, because we do have a full slate on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. That's not normal. Like Thanksgiving, you get your 3 games every year.
it's Dallas and Detroit guaranteed. Like it's not that great.
I
Hey,
mean,
Dallas is starting to look good, so I don't
But
know.
it's Dallas.
Seeing good football is one thing, but like, there's always for a while it
But
was
it's
just nice
Dallas.
when my family would get together and see Dallas lose on Thanksgiving. There's a lot of times they win, but when they lose, it just makes Thanksgiving that much sweeter.
Well, I can tell you that I'm thankful that the Titans beat the Packers on Thursday Night Football. Last podcast, we talked a lot about it, but we didn't yet see the game. Now we know that the Titans did win, but Cody and I are still friends, mostly because he had enough time to cool down after the game.
I also picked the Titans to win the game, so wasn't that surprised.
And the Eagles won, so I'm happy too this Thanksgiving week.
Barely.
But win's a win.
They're going to
They
lose
are going to
this
have to
week
figure it
though.
out. No, they're not. Talk to me next week when they play the Titans, and I might agree with you, but not this week. All right. On this episode, because we're a fantasy football podcast, we're going to talk a little bit of fantasy news and notes. I should say NFL news and notes in general. We're going to hit some quotes of the week to have a little fun here. And then we're going to break down the Week 12 waiver wire and preview all 3 games this Thanksgiving, giving you some of the best starts, sits, and sleepers from those games. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at The Couch GMs, and join our Discord chat. The link is in the description of the video podcast you are watching. All right, guys, let's finally jump right in here to NFL news. And I hope you didn't set your waivers and then forget about it like on Sunday night, because I know I posted our waiver wire article on thecouchgms.com and then immediately had to go back and add Latavius Murray after the news was announced today that Melvin Gordon was waived by the Denver Broncos. And they also placed other running back Chase Edmonds on injured reserve. I am absolutely shocked. Like, I get there's fumbling issues. He fumbled again this week, but they completely waived Melvin Gordon. I did not see it coming.
I think Melvin Gordon is past his prime, and yes, he does have the fumbling issues, but you're talking about a team that still likes to believe they have a chance at the playoffs, and they are struggling for talent. Melvin Gordon, be what he is still talented, and it is surprising that they got him.
Yeah, I guess. He just fumbled so much this year for them. Like if you're not going to trust him to play, you got to move on. So I guess I'm not as surprised by it, but the bigger question is, one, do you cut him from your fantasy team if we don't know where his next destination is before waivers? And two, if you don't cut him, what teams are you hoping that he goes to?
I don't care what team he goes to, he's a cut. That's just my answer.
I don't think there's a team out there that's going to immediately throw him into the starting lineup that's in contention enough that it's going to matter. So I'm also cutting him, and I'll just, go back and waiver rush for him if we get shocked somewhere. So I'm with Tyler. But, I don't know. We'll see.
If you cut him and then the Chiefs go out and sign Melvin Gordon, there's going to be a waiver wire panic to get Melvin Gordon just because it's the Chiefs, or if the Bills were to do it, or somebody along those lines. But I still don't think there's a team he can go to make that big of an impact that you need to roster him. I would cut him. There's other people out there.
But you even just mentioned 2 teams that we'd be excited about, and even yet he'd be in at best a split. It's not going to be pretty for him fantasy-wise anyway. He'd have to go somewhere that he could be a bell cow, and there's not that team out there right now.
Interesting. It's just weird because the Bills come to mind as like the team that would be, I think, the most exciting. And we talked about it all offseason, how like that was the match made in heaven, quote unquote, that we wanted. So I guess if I'm the Melvin Gordon owner, hopefully he doesn't clear waivers, which I imagine he will, just because of contract situation. Then he gets to pick his team. I'd probably play wait and see because there is some names on the waiver wire this week, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but there's not like, I don't think there's like a home run must go up and pick unless you're really into Latavius Murray, but that Broncos offense can't score points anyways. So I guess I'm more in the wait and see. So already starting off the show with some differences.
Yeah, I mean, we've been agreeing too much these last few weeks, so we got to figure out how to disagree. But let's just give a little shout out to running back, wide receiver, kick returner Cordarrelle Patterson, who this week broke the record for most kick return touchdowns. Just applause to there. I mean, that was out of nowhere too. I mean, I didn't even honestly knew he still returned balls. I mean, I thought because he was so involved in that Falcons offense, and I don't watch a lot of Falcons games, he just played on offense now. But no, apparently not.
Yeah, it's nice seeing that because, we on the bachelor party sat and watched videos of Devin Hester for quite a while because kick returns are exciting. It's one of the most exciting plays in football, but ever since the new kickoff rules, you don't see a lot of kick returns and you don't see a lot of kick return touchdowns. So yeah, I'm definitely glad we got to see one. It was definitely exciting. It's got Patterson up there. He did break the record for most kick return touchdowns, but I saw a post on social media earlier asking who the best all-time returner was, and they asked if Patterson is better than Devin Hester, and I still don't think it's anywhere close.
No,
It's just the stretches
close.
that Hester had. Exactly. Like, Patterson's had a longer career, but Hester was just, he had, what, a 2-3 year stretch where he returned like a bazillion. It was insane to watch. And
I
anytime he
think it
touched the ball,
was
he was a
exactly
touchdown.
a bazillion, yes.
Yep. Exactly a
No,
bazillion. Not more,
this
not
is
less.
this is no disrespect to Cordarrelle Patterson. He's been a guy that I've been, hoping the Packers would sign for quite a few seasons now. But Devin Hester legit has a shot at the Hall of Fame based on punt returning. I don't think you can say the same
Mhm.
about Cordarrelle Patterson on kick returns. Um, just like you wouldn't have said that about Josh Cribbs on who held the record before Cordarrelle Patterson broke it.
Man, I haven't heard the name Josh Cribbs in a long time. So there you go, right on your cue there. Yeah, it's completely different in this situation. But congrats one more time to Cordarrelle Patterson. And we have a lot of quarterback news, which I don't think any of us were expecting to have quarterback news coming into this news segment. 3 potential changes. I guess the first one is a change that's becoming more permanent. Ron Rivera naming Taylor Heineke the Commanders' starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. In his words, he said that Carson Wentz is going to come back in the building and they're going to evaluate if he's ready to be activated as the backup quarterback from his injury or if he's going to stay deactivated for a few more weeks with his injury. But Taylor Heineke, starting quarterback for the Commanders. Do you guys like this move?
I think they're just going to be playing the hot hand, personally. I think if Heineke goes out there and has a game where he has 0 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 100 yards passing, they're going to go right to Carson Wentz the next game. But for right now, Heineke's winning games, and as long as he's winning, why wouldn't you play him?
Yeah, as long as they're in a playoff spot, they'll keep rolling with Heineke. Like they were,
Yeah, because
they
we
were.
all expected them to come from their 1-4 start to be in a playoff spot at this point. Even though they're at the bottom of the NFC East, they're still above 500. It's crazy. The Texans are not having as much success at quarterback, and they're talking about moving away from Davis Mills to the man, the myth, the legend, Kyle Allen, because that's their answer. And I get it on this one. Like, they think they need to change because it's just not working with Davis Mills. But Kyle Allen is not your future. I would almost rather than just stick with Davis Mills, run the season out. And if he doesn't make a turnaround, it's not the guy.
Unless you have already determined he's not the guy, then evaluate what else you have in the building and prepare to draft a quarterback. Like if you want to see if Kyle Allen can be a solid backup or a potential gap fill if you decide not to take a quarterback this year. I mean, if you've already said we're done with Davis Mills, there's no point keeping him out there.
I would say, who cares? Texans are going to suck regardless. Neither one of these quarterbacks are noteworthy anyway. So either way, no matter who they choose, it's still not worth talking about the Texans more than we already have.
Well, there's one team that's in a playoff race that's talking about potential quarterback changes, and that's the New York Jets. Now, I get it. They have Joe Flacco in the building with playoff experience, a veteran. They are in the playoff chase. Zach Wilson has been very up and down, but this is a very out of left field call from me. I don't know if you guys agree.
Well, we'll have to see if it actually comes through, but there's no denying that this team looked better with Joe Flacco on offense, at least. Like Zach
Yeah,
Wilson is the second overall pick from last season, but their offense has been straight garbage for the. I mean, they lost to a team that didn't even score an offensive touchdown. What anything other than their offense is super underwhelming.
yeah. If this defense is going to play the way they're playing, you have a chance to not only make the playoffs, but make a run in the playoffs because we've all heard the saying defense wins championships. Now we've seen different things in recent years where offense has really taken a forefront. But if you have a strong defense, you have a chance to win any game because you don't need to score much. But if Zach Wilson's not doing the bare minimum you need to be able to win those games, then yeah, I mean, look, Joe Flacco's not your future, but if he's got it right now to be able to put up some offense, then why not? Honestly, I mean, even if you don't think Joe Flacco is really that talented, I mean, why not do something just to kind of spark this team again? Because the Jets were one of the teams that we were like, wow, this team actually has a chance to make a run now. They look good. And now they are right back to flat. So why not make a move just to try to spark this team up and see if we can't get something going?
So I think my question to you is looking more long term then. So this is a very young team. We talk about these Jets rookies all the time and how they're like, lighting the world on fire. You said Joe Flacco doesn't have a lot of time left. That's very true. Zach Wilson being a second year quarterback is still in development. By benching him for Flacco in this case, I think you're almost putting in the situation where you're just going to stun his confidence and he's not going to be your guy in New York. Maybe it'll end up being like a Tua situation and he'll end up turning it around, but I think that's the only scenario that I've thought of this happening that it actually worked out. Um, are you prematurely opening and then closing your window by almost alienating Zach Wilson if you bench him?
Look, let's be honest here. If anybody watched the highlights from this past game or just watched the game in general, um, Zach Wilson was bad, like really bad. Like he tried to throw screens and overthrew his man by 3-4 yards, like on a screen. The guy's right next to you. Like these are plays that we could make in the NFL, and that's saying a lot. So he's just bad right now. Either he isn't your future, and it's better to realize it sooner, and instead of running your franchise into the ground trying to force something that isn't there, or maybe you just put him on the bench, let him time to give him time to recollect himself and learn from the coaching staff, learn from Flacco, who is the veteran, and maybe try again next season to come back with a fire under his belly or improve something because right now he just doesn't have it. And I think you keep putting him into game situations and you keep throwing him out there trying to force him in there and he keeps playing the way he is, that's going to mess with his head just as much as benching him would.
And let's not forget, Flacco's third string. They promoted Mike White already past Flacco as the backup.
That
So
is
like
true.
they've
That's
already
true.
been uh manipulating like what's going on behind the scenes at the quarterback position. And Mike, so if they, if it stunts the confidence, they can see what they have in Mike White. He was drafted in 2018, so he's still a young guy as well. So yes, I know Zach Wilson has the draft pedigree. He has, all the chances in the world. And there probably is if a team that would trade for him this offseason because they had a high grade of him coming out the draft if they would need to move on. But at the end of the day, the NFL is about winning football games, and the head coaches are should put their team in their best chance to win. And the way Zach Wilson has looked the last couple weeks, that is not the case.
All right, I see your guys' point there. I'm glad we were able to talk it out a little bit. But let's just be clear before we move on. Zach Wilson has not been benched. They're still evaluating as of the time we're recording, but they did hint at the fact that they are evaluating potential other options. And then obviously, before we get out of news, we have to talk about injury news for the week. And just when the tight end position got bad, it got even worse. As Kyle Pitts has a knee injury, I think they believe it's an MCL injury. He was placed on injury reserve, and I think it's likely his season is over. Um, what's next for the Falcons and who's left at tight end?
Fantasy tight end wise, there's really not much out there. I mean, you could try to make a case for a guy like Juwan Johnson, who's caught a touchdown in 4 consecutive games, but outside of the touchdowns, what did he do? Um, but honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge loss because Kyle Pitts really hasn't been doing that much anyway, but he is a guy that you were throwing in there um, just because of his name, just because of the talent that he could have. And he has been kind of emerging lately. But yeah, I don't know. It sucks, but not a huge loss.
Is there any of the tight ends from Atlanta that we can talk about this too, but I don't think any of them were on your waiver wire article, George. Correct me if I'm wrong, that
No.
you're going to pick up as a spot start? Like Cole Pruitt, he looked to be like a guy that got involved this week a little bit. Parker Hess, and then Tyler, your guy, Anthony Ferkser, Arthur Smith, he's still there.
Yeah, I can tell you that Michael Pruitt and Anthony Ferkser are both, longtime Titans, and they're both Arthur Smith favorites. So I think both of those guys are potential touchdown threats. I think they are going to be involved in the offense, but they're not going to be involved enough that I'm like, you got to pick them up. I do think that Michael Pruitt was used more in this most recent game. We have seen Ferkser in the past for the touchdown chances. Ferkser is a very good receiving tight end, but he has zero blocking ability for a run first team, so he's not on the field very often. Um, I wouldn't go out and pick up either of them as somebody who's watched them a lot.
So I know that there wasn't a lot of targets going around, but before we move off of Pitts and the Falcons, does Pitts going down give any boost to Drake London?
I mean,
no, because Pitts wasn't doing much to begin with, and
yeah.
London still was doing average. I think London is going to be that guy where it's like, he has that potential. You know that he can put up a big week if they would find ways to utilize him correctly. But the Falcons' offense just doesn't work through the air, they work on the ground. And as long as it stays that way, London is going to stay as a, play it by the matchup flex play for the rest of the year.
I like it, but we do have someone on the ground who did get hurt, and that was Chiefs running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who left the game with an ankle injury. I know one of us put on here on the rundown, is it Pacheco time? And I actually think it was Pacheco time before that, but this definitely helps.
Yeah, it limits the split. If CEH is to miss time, obviously we have to monitor the injury. It is still very early, so we don't know too much yet on how long he'll be out or if he'll even be out. But if CEH does miss time, Pacheco is going to get more usage. And I think you need to monitor the Chiefs' offense. If, Juju misses more time, Kadarius Toney, who is also on this list, he is next, so we could throw him in here too. He has a hamstring injury. If Toney misses time, if Juju misses more time, like if any of these guys miss time, they're going to have to start using the ground game because Travis Kelce can only do so much. So if CEH is out and the receivers are out, Pacheco might finally be a fantasy starter.
Yeah, saying he had 100 yards this week, and I didn't even put him on the waiver wire column because I've already done it the last 4 weeks. But yeah, keep checking to see if he's out there. Add him, please.
I think George is right though. It's been Pacheco time. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he got hurt in the first quarter. He didn't have a touch the week prior. Like Pacheco's had 15 plus touches or even rushing attempts the last 2 games. It's just he's not doing much with them. I mean, he had 100 yards, but he had 10.7 points. So he didn't do anything through the ground. Wasn't a part of the passing game option with all the wide receivers down. Like he's just disappointing with how explosive they talk about him, and then that doesn't translate to what we see on Sunday.
I'll say I did think he looked more explosive last night than he has in his previous opportunities. Maybe that's the Chargers defense. Maybe that's just him finally getting up to speed in the NFL, but we'll have to wait and see. He still should be more than 40% owned. Just a little waiver wire plug before we get to that. But also on the Chiefs, Kadarius Toney got a bunch of people goose eggs on Sunday night as he left the game with a hamstring injury. Very disappointing with the opportunity he had in front of him with all those injuries, and didn't work out for us.
Yeah, I wasn't on the Darius Toney bandwagon to begin with, and less so now. I think Juju is still going to be the guy once Juju's healthy, and having a concussion, it was a nasty concussion, so he could miss multiple weeks based off of how bad it was. But concussions aren't typically a long-term injury, so once Juju's back, I still think he's the guy, especially because it's a hamstring injury for Kadarius Toney. And we all know that hamstring injuries linger. Even if they're healthy enough to play, you could see him go out, run one route, and then be like, nope, still hurts. Hamstring injuries are the worst. They definitely could linger. But guys, we've spent a lot of time on this. So I'm just going to throw out the next three guys and let me know what you think, just as a blanket statement. But we got Joe Mixon also went down for a concussion. Justin Fields injured his non-throwing shoulder. He is considered day to day. And Mike Williams, who finally made his way back, caught a gorgeous like pirouette catch on the sideline with a toe tap, but you could see it if you watch closely. Once that bad ankle hit the ground on that toe tap, it just gave out on him, and his ankle is injured yet again. Out of those three, do we think anybody's going to miss time? Any serious fantasy implications? Which one's the biggest blow? What do you think?
Oh,
I think
if it's,
go ahead, Cody.
I was gonna say it for fantasy, the status of Justin Fields is the biggest impact because he has been, a waiver wire sensation these last 4 weeks, and it's stated as day to day. But then you also have to wonder, like, if his shoulder's bothering him, how many of those designed runs does he still attempt? Do they try to limit his hits? Does he stay in the pocket a little bit more and take away what he was valuable in fantasy? So he might even be out there, like even this week, but could be not as valuable because they're not running him because of that shoulder injury.
I'm with Cody there on Justin Fields, but I still think the biggest impact is Mike Williams. Not only because I think Mike Williams is going to miss time. Like, it's going to be one of those situations where it's like, he just came back from injury, we aggravated it. We got to give him at least a week to rest it now. But that also extends Josh Palmer's fantasy relevance window. And obviously, he looked great playing majority of the starter snaps because Keenan Allen was on a snap count, along with Williams missing most of the game. He's going to be relevant for the next week or so until Mike Williams is back to 100% again, just because of that.
And as we're sitting here, a notification came across saying that Justin Fields' shoulder was a left shoulder dislocation, a very painful injury that he still played through, and he is day to day. Now, if this was his throwing shoulder dislocation, yeah, he's missing time. His non-throwing shoulder, there's a big chance of it is going to be pain management. But like Cody said, I mean, a dislocated shoulder is a very painful injury. Even once it is popped back in, it's still going to hurt for a while. So they might not do the designed runs. It's definitely something to monitor. I would have a backup in mind. Joe Mixon, obviously, a huge injury as well. Concussions, sometimes you can come back next week. Sometimes you miss multiple weeks. Depends on how bad it is. Samaje Perine did actually look good in his absence, but that's still not a guy that I'm excited to throw out there, especially this week. Bengals are going to be facing the Titans, who have one of the best run defenses in the NFL. So Samaje Perine against a top run defense, not an immediate pickup for me, but guys, I think that's enough for injuries. We will keep
Real
monitoring
quick,
those all week.
speaking of the Bengals and Samaje Perine, it's not confirmed that he's going to play this week, but Jamar Chase is off crutches and is planning to practice this week. So that could be a big name that you might be looking to get back this week. Again, not sure he'll play, but you Jamar Chase owners out there, you might get him back in this week or in the next couple of weeks.
Which absolutely will be huge, but we got to monitor it throughout the week, and definitely check out our later in the week podcast because we will break down the injuries right before game time, let you know who's in, who's out, who are expecting to play, all of that. But that's enough for injuries. So let's go ahead and move on to George's favorite segment, Quotes of the Week.
Quotes of the week this week. I'm actually going to let Cody start us off because he put our first quote on here, taking us to New York.
Oh, God. This is George's segment, and I was looking up a stat. So hang on. All right, I got it in front of me. All right, so we talked about how bad the Jets were in the second half, and Robert Saleh was asked about it after the game. And you just love when a coach is just like straight up blunt and honest. And he said his Jets second half performance, it was dog shit. And I think us as viewers, us as Couch GMs at home, we could all see that. But I also want to say something to, Robert Saleh, and he knows a lot more football. He's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But you had a chance to win the game at the end of regulation. I know your quarterback has been struggling and all that. You had all 3 of your timeouts, or at least 2 of them, and you all played for overtime. If your offense was doing so bad, why did you even play for overtime? Like, obviously you gave up the kick return, but I just get tired of seeing of coaches and stuff like that playing not to win the game. You had multiple timeouts. You had over a minute on the clock. Like, go out there. That could have been a galvanizing moment, a moment that changed Zach Wilson's career. He played terrible the whole time. If he could have turned around and got them into field goal range, we're not talking about is he starting next week. We're talking about is Zach Wilson finally figuring it out. So yes, the offense did let him and the defense down, but some of the questionable play calling at the end of the fourth quarter had me raising my eyebrows.
And it sucks because, the Jets and Patriots, with the Jets actually looking good this year, Patriots are always have a chance to make the playoffs. This was supposed to be a really good game, and it ended up being a terrible game. 17 total punts in the game is just hard to watch. When we talked about fantasy points being down across the board, and on a fantasy standpoint, like the Jets game was a snooze fest. You had the Ravens and Panthers game was a snooze fest. The Eagles and Colts was a snooze fest. Like, you have all these games that were just lackluster, not putting up the points that we expect. Um, it's definitely frustrating from a fantasy standpoint, on top of just a football standpoint, to see so many points just being neglected because football's not as exciting this year. Well, I don't want to say not as exciting, but not as high powered offense as we're used to seeing.
Agree with you there. And I'm also with Cody on, like, that's such old school football thinking, not going out there and trying to get those points before the end of regulation, unless you're like pinned inside the 5 with 30 seconds left. Go out there and try it with those 3 timeouts. But I'll keep this segment short. I have one quote to throw in here in quotes of the week, and it was during the Ravens and Panthers game, Lamar Jackson had a quarterback draw for a touchdown, and play-by-play announcer Kevin Kugler described it as, he is like a salmon covered in Vaseline. Not oil, not like that. A salmon covered in Vaseline. That was like, why? Where does that, like, out of left field? Where'd that come from?
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's definitely definitely a weird one for sure. Can I throw out one more
Sure.
quote here? It's not a big one. It is a tweet. It is not a normal quote, but it's from Odell Beckham Jr. following the Cowboys and Vikings game, where he said they went crazy today with the eyes wide open emoji after all the rumors of OBJ going to the Cowboys. So that's another one to monitor. I mean, he's starting to look at the Cowboys. Cowboys are looking at him. We might see a match made in heaven here.
I believe
And
he
it's
was
even
also,
more fun that they're fighting with the Giants is the only other seemingly realistic option for him. And the Giants went out and lost this week to the Lions. So it might just be happening.
or don't rule out the Chiefs, because he was following along for that game too. And that would not be surprised if they throw OBJ into the mix in Kansas City. Because his tweet was 15 to 87, too smooth. Maybe he doesn't want to go there because that's already a smooth connection, but we'll have to wait and see.
He'll just make 2 smooth connections there in Kansas City, maybe. But that'll wrap up quotes of the week. And now why don't we talk some more fantasy and hit the Week 12 waiver wire? All right, I started off our waiver wire column on the couchgms.com. Make sure you go check it out. A little bit different this week because we are starting to get towards the end of buys. We're starting to get towards the fantasy playoffs. This is something I always take a look at, and I'll let you guys kind of talk also if it's something that you guys do or recommend or don't recommend. If I have a top back, I like to go out and try to find a handcuff, so I know I have a backfield locked up going into the fantasy playoffs. This is obviously if I have the bench flexibility and if I'm locked into a playoff spot, because it's always going to be better than having to go out and waiver rush for that guy or end up playing some backup somewhere that's going to get you 3 points in a fantasy playoff game. So if you want to see the list of what my top handcuffs to go grab were, you can go over to the article and check it out. But what are your guys' thoughts on that strategy for your roster going into the fantasy playoffs?
I don't hate it. I think at this point in the season, you kind of know who your starters are. You kind of know who your backups are in case your starters are hurt. And then, early in the season, you like to roster some young guys or some questionable guys that you're hoping will break out. Or maybe you're one of those guys that rosters a backup defense, but I'm not that kind of person. But once you get to this point in the season, you don't really need those guys waiting to see if they break out anymore, because look, we're over halfway through the season. You know if they broke out or not. There's still a couple young people coming up that I'll mention one later once we get down these waiver articles that you can still pick up and roster because they might break out. But for the most part, you know what you got. So why not go roster the backup, roster somebody that might be utilized later on. But the thing is, if you pick up a handcuff and somebody does break out, or you do have an injury and you need to pick up somebody, you still can drop the handcuff for somebody else on free agency.
Yeah, I think I'm even less of a fan of going out and getting your handcuffs, especially just to have a handcuff. Like obviously, I think Alexander Mattinson always comes to mind when we talk about handcuffs. You want to make sure he's owned, or even if you don't have Dalvin Cook, go out and get him. But like the other guys, like a lot of them, like I'm not going to get the backup for you know like Deion Jackson. He wasn't that great when Jonathan Taylor was already hurt. I'm not going to worry about carrying him into the regular season. Um, there's the Bills. If James Cook, Devin Singletary, like they're haven't been doing great. Do you even want the starter at that point? I guess that's the question. Do you even want the starter to then consider going on to get the handcuffs? So I think some warrant it and others don't. But don't forget, like I know we might feel like there's a reprieve because there's no bye weeks in week 12. But there is 6 teams on bye in week 14. So we are not through buys yet. So it isn't a must to get through your handcuffs. I'd rather you look ahead and try to grab those people that week 14 bye, because that could be a crucial game for you to get into the playoffs than worrying about making sure you have a backup locked up on your roster.
One other thing I will say on the handcuffs before we move on from them is be careful. I can't tell you the amount of times that we have seen a starting running back go down and we're like, oh, you got to pick up the backup. And we all run out and we all pick up the same guy. And then the third string guy suddenly becomes a thing. I mean, look at the Colts earlier in the season when Jonathan Taylor did go down. We were all like, let's go get Nyheim Hines. And then Deion Jackson somehow got the start. We're like, what is going on? The Eagles are one of the worst ones for it because Kenny Gainwell was one of the better backup running backs in the season last year. And then down goes Miles Sanders. We all pick up Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott is the starter. What? Makes no sense. Titans are another good one. I know we have Dontrell Hilliard on here. If Derrick Henry goes down, Dontrell Hilliard will still get the pass catching, but Hassan Haskins, the rookie, is going to be the one getting all the carries. So you don't know. Or they could always go out and get another running back. You look, Melvin Gordon, if he passes through waivers and doesn't get signed right away, he's a guy that a team with an injured running back can go pick up real quick. I'm not saying he will be out there for that long, but you never know. So be careful with handcuffs because you don't always know who that handcuff is. But we can go ahead and move on. George, you want to just go over real quick some of the other people in the article here?
Sure thing. So we talked about Latavius Murray earlier in the show. He is one of my 2 running backs on this list. The other one is Rachaad White, who I don't think I really got the opportunity to mention last week because I missed our waiver wire article episode. But he was starting over Leonard Fournette before their bye week. So somebody that should be owned just speculatively, if nothing else. And we'll see what kind of workload he gets going forward. Bunch of wide receivers on this article with Demarcus Robinson up here. He seemed to start to get the lead wide receiver role in Baltimore, but we'll see. That's going to be up and down. It's just the nature of their passing offense. Donovan Peoples-Jones is an interesting one because he's actually broken 10 half PPR points the last 4 of his last 5 games, and Deshaun Watson's coming back soon. Treylon Burks, Tyler could probably talk about him a little bit more than I can. He started to break out a little bit now that he's coming back from injury. At tight end, we mentioned a little bit of Jawan Johnson earlier, as he's someone who's just scoring touchdowns from the tight end position, and that's all we can ask for right now with the state of the position. And then streaming defense of the week, I have the Washington Commanders. Anyone you want to spotlight here, guys?
I mean, I'll pick up Treylon Burks just because, he's on the Titans, so I know a little bit more about him than I do about everybody else. But Treylon Burks is a first-round pick. I mean, he is the guy that was drafted at the same pick that we traded A.J. Brown for. So everyone is looking at him to be the A.J. Brown. So far, he has not been that guy, but he has had the talent upside. In the beginning of the season, they didn't want to give him that many targets because he was still learning. Then he got injured. Now he's back from injury, and the kid looks good. We all thought Robert Woods would be the number 1 for the Titans. He hasn't been. Treylon Burks is the number 1. But I would say temper your expectations a little bit because the Titans, no matter how much I want Treylon Burks to be the guy, no matter how excited I am that we actually had a 300-yard passing game for the first time in 10 years, the Titans are still not a pass-first team. They are still a run-first team. They will still always be a run-first team. And anytime you have a team that is focused on the run as heavily as the Titans are, no receiver is really going to be that valuable because their chances are so limited. AJ Brown was a special case because he's so talented. So I would say If you want to pick him up, go for it, but I would still wait a week. Make sure the Titans are actually going to throw the ball first before we go picking up Traylon Burks.
Yeah, I think that is some good advice, and I think George knocked it out of the park this week on his article. So I'll let him if he wants to highlight anyone else, but definitely go check that out. So I'm just throwing some few other names at the tight end position. We're recording this before Monday Night Football, and I know Kyler Murray is inactive this week, but rookie Trey McBride and Max Williams, who is actually on the practice squad but got elevated for the game. Those are two tight ends I'm going to keep a close eye on tonight to see if any of them separate themselves. Are they a part of the offense in replacing Zach Ertz? Like that was a tight end, um, you know, an offense that used the tight end decently. So I'd like to see if one of these young guys can step up and become, a potential waiver wire steal that can help you out long term because the tight end market is so rough at the moment.
I mean, I feel like we could go for a while just naming all these tight ends that are like very and like you can take a shot at them, but they're going to be touchdown dependent regardless. I know you guys have like Tyler Conklin. He's one guy. If Cole Kmet's still available out there, maybe some people are even going to drop him after he had a little bit of a disappointing game. I think he's someone that's worth going out to add, but we even mentioned Justin Fields is banged up. Hayden Hurst has been okay. Like it's just so rough at the tight end position that you might as well just play matchups and see who's more likely to get a touchdown based on that and hope if you don't have one of those top maybe like four. I'm including Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, you kind of have to throw out there, and same with Kittle at this point.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's go ahead and move on to a couple other guys that were not in the article. First, we have quarterback Deshaun Watson. He is available to practice. He is available to return. So definitely worth keeping an eye on him. He is 52% owned, probably because suspended people are stashable in most leagues. Not Yahoo leagues apparently, but the other leagues he is. So he's definitely worth looking at, especially if you're in quarterback hell and you don't have anybody that's great. Biggest thing about Deshaun Watson, look, he's probably rusty. He hasn't played in a while, but he is a mobile quarterback, and running quarterbacks are a cheat code. So definitely worth stashing him if you can. The other one I'd like to highlight is rookie receiver Jameson Williams for the Detroit Lions. He is 15% owned. He was activated, or not activated, but he is available to practice again. So Jameson Williams is coming back. He was their first round pick wide receiver. He is a definitely exciting wide receiver to watch. They do still have Amon-Ra St. Brown there, but I think Williams can step right in as the number 2 receiver, especially with TJ Hawkinson gone. George and I were talking about Jameson Williams before the podcast, and George said, at the worst, I think Williams will take the targets that Hawkinson was getting before he left. So definitely an interesting name to watch. I think he is an exciting player. Probably not going to break out right away, but this is one of those few guys that comes out late in the season where I think you pick him up and hope he turns into something. I think he is worth owning if you have the open roster spot.
I'm 100% shocked he's only 15% owned too, because like you were talking about, Watson can't be stashed in all leagues because some leagues don't allow suspended players on IR. Jameson Williams being on IR can go on any reserve that is out there in a fantasy league. So you can't tell me that 75% or 85% of fantasy leagues don't have a reserve spot. So even if he's not activated this week, because they do play on Thanksgiving, we're getting to that preview next. Go out there and add him with one of your waiver spots, or even after waivers, put him on reserve and add another guy to your roster for a 1 week preview.
Cool. Well, you brought up Thanksgiving, so why don't we jump into the Thanksgiving Day preview?
And fitting that we just talked about the Detroit Lions, and our first game on Thanksgiving, as always, is the Detroit Lions, this time hosting the Buffalo Bills. Bills don't have to travel too far from last week, and actually we did put in our quotes a week. They had some really fun Twitter back and forth with the Detroit Lions saying how like they didn't break the tables to save them for Thanksgiving dinner and such, but thanking them for letting them use the stadium last week.
For sure. Now, Buffalo did go back to Buffalo, and now they're coming back to Detroit on Thursday. Injury-wise, though, we talked about Jameson Williams was designated to return off IR, PUP. I can't remember exactly which one he was technically labeled under. But other wide receivers, DJ Chark, he was a DNP, and Josh Reynolds was a DNP. So they're still looking for some wide receiver help outside of Jamison Williams. And then DeAndre Swift, which I feel like you guys can talk a little bit more on, is listed as a full participant again. This has now been like 4 weeks. He's been quote unquote back, but they're still not giving him the touches. So we have to think something is still going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably the highest on Swift out of the three of us. I still think that Swift is fine. I feel like what happened was he got injured and they tried to play him through the injury, and he ended up not only re-aggravating the injury but getting a whole nother injury on top of it the last time they tried to force him. Even though he is listed as a full participant, even though he is listed as not injured, I feel like they're still being cautious with him because look, the Lions are not in a situation where they are making a strong push for the playoffs or anything. Um, and Swift is their future. Like he's going to be their franchise back. And when you have Wow. Jamal Williams. Sorry, the other Jay Williams. When you have Jamal Williams playing as well as he is this year, you don't need to force Swift in there. So I think they're just playing extra cautious. But look, this is now his third week of being a full participant, not injured. So I think this is where the breakout really starts to come. I think this is where he really starts to see his usage go up and up. And I think it's only going to continue to rise throughout the season, especially since he is their main pass catching back. So in the passing game, especially, he's going to be utilized. I still think that DeAndre Swift is going to be a star for the rest of the season. And, it is still not trade deadline yet in a lot of leagues. Most leagues have it on Black Friday. DeAndre Swift is a fantastic buy low candidate if you can snag him from a frustrated owner.
And there is obviously some kind of risk to it, but I'm in the middle, I think, between where Tyler and Cody are. The reason that I agree with Tyler is because he's still listed on the injury report, despite being listed as a full participant for at least, I think, 2 weeks now. Like Cody brought up the fact that even if they are practicing in full, if they were on the injury report the previous week, they have to go on at least one day that week, or there's some weird rule like that. But we're past that threshold for DeAndre Swift, and he's still going on the injury report and being listed as full on and on and on. So he's still definitely banged up to an extent. Tyler's gone. I think Tyler's back. I think we're good.
That was weird.
So it's a very fluid situation. I do think he's going to start coming up in usage, especially with the Lions now starting to win games. That definitely helps his cause, because not that the Lions are going to make a playoff push, but it makes them feel like they're still playing for something here, and there's no point for them to just let him sit back there and look for next season.
Well, I mean, the Lions do the same record as the current 7 seed. They're the 10 seed, but they have the same record. So they're on a 3-game win
That's
streak.
better
So
than I thought.
They could make the playoffs. Yeah, I guess I'm the lowest on Swift, and it's not that I don't think it's talent wise. I just think with his injury concern, obviously the injury is still bothering him, whether he's practicing or not. I mean, he's now had 4 weeks where he's played, and the most rushing attempts he's gotten in a game is 6. Obviously, there's some injury concerns. We saw him have 15 attempts in week 1. That might not be the guy that DeAndre Swift can be, just based on all the health that he's dealt with. Now, with that said, I will acknowledge that DeAndre Swift can take any play to the house. Like he's that kind of special when it comes to explosiveness and stuff. But then Jamal Williams, the season he's having, the commitment they have to getting him the red zone work, as now he leads the league with 12 rushing touchdowns. It does I guess I'm just more of like, I don't see Swift as a must start that we were hoping for when we drafted him 2nd, 3rd round.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, then we'll move on because we're spending a lot of time on one player. But DeAndre Swift, like you said, is not getting the touches that you'd expect from him. 6 carries is the most carries. He is getting some passing down work, but even with the limited usage, even with Jamal Williams stealing pretty much every touchdown, out of the 4 weeks that he's been back, the least amount of points that he's had is 6.5 points in a game. And anytime you have a running back that's not getting used, but he's still getting 6.5 points, that means if they decide to use him the way that they did in the beginning of the season, his ceiling is so high. If his floor is around 6 or 7 points, which trust me, I get it. Nobody wants one of their top running backs to get 6 points. I get that. But we have some starters out here that are getting 6 points and we're like, "Look, I got to start him cuz it's all I got." So, if you have a guy whose floor is 6 to 10 points, but his ceiling is like 25 to 30 because of the talent, I feel like he still has to be in your lineups personally.
There's really good
Yeah,
arguments to both sides of this whole thing, but I think I have to cut us off because we can talk about this all night. Tyler and I have been talking about this for like 2 hours before this podcast started.
More than that.
So, yeah, it was probably more than that even. But we have to just talk fantasy here for a second. Lions side of the ball in a tough matchup against the Bills. Are we just playing Amra? Is that it?
No, I think you
outside.
could start I think you can still start Jamal Williams.
Okay.
I think you can start DeAndre Swift. I think that's the only three that I would play, but I would definitely start those three because Jamal Williams. Say what you want about the Bills' defense, say what you want about the Lions' offense, they're still going to score. And if they're going to score, Jamal Williams is most likely getting the touchdown. And I think DeAndre Swift is still talented enough that you're going to have to put him in your lineup. Because I'd love to see the people that you have on your team that you're able to bench DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Swift is not a must start for me, but unless you know, unless you got like Kenneth Walker off the waivers to replace him or something like that, especially with like guys like Joe Mixon getting hurt this week and some other names like that, he's probably going to find your way in. Hopefully, you have some better options because it is a tough matchup. It's not even a matchup I love playing Jamal in because the Bills' defense has been so well, but you have to admit the Lions are playing pretty well of late.
And then moving on to the Bills side of the ball, the Lions have been playing pretty well of late, but their defense is still mediocre at best, in my opinion. So I think you're full go on all of your builds. Josh Allen, Gabe Davis can probably go in there as well as Stephon Diggs. Dawson Knox, considering the tight end situation, can definitely be a dartboard candidate for you. And then the running backs, we're gonna have to play this again. Are you playing Devin Singletary this week? I think I'm in on him this week. What about you?
Yeah, I'm playing him.
Singletary's been doing enough that even I have to start getting on the bandwagon of Singletary should be in your lineup. But I'm telling you, he's still just a 4 point game away or a 2 point matchup away because they're going to turn to the pass the whole game. But yeah, I feel like Singletary's doing enough at this point to be in your lineup.
They showed more balanced run to pass this past game than I think the Bills have in recent memory, in my opinion. So we'll see if that keeps up or if that was just an anomaly based on the situation of the week. Second game on Thanksgiving, then we have a divisional matchup of the New York Giants traveling to the Dallas Cowboys. So Zeke is a limited participant in practice here on a short week. He did play last week. He obviously got a touchdown as well. But someone put on a rundown. Pollard is the guy. Is that Tyler? I'm gonna guess it's Tyler.
Oh, yeah, that would be Tyler. Look, it was about a 50-50 split for Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. So I still understand wanting to keep Zeke in your lineup because look, Zeke still finished with 17 points, but it was a high scoring affair. They're not going to put up 40 every week. But Tony Pollard, man, Tony Pollard had the game of his life, 34 fantasy points. He is averaging this season 15 points per game. And that's even including the games that Zeke was there. But in his last three matchups, he's had 33, 20, and 34. Tony Pollard is just too valuable not to be in the Cowboys lineup, and he's too valuable not to be in your own lineup. Even with Zeke there this week, he still got 15 carries for 80 yards, and he took 6 catches for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. Um, Tony Pollard is so talented. At this point, he's got to be in your lineup.
Yeah, I agree. Tony Pollard should be in your lineup. I will say it did. I am not concerned about Tony Pollard because he's very similar um, to DeAndre Swift. He can take any play all the way to the house. Like he has that explosiveness in it. But sometimes contract, sometimes name, personality can get in the way of things. And they did come out and say Zeke was not going to get a full workload. His first game back, they were going to ease him back. Um, so I would be a little bit weary. Not that I'm pulling Tony Pollard, but wouldn't be surprised if, it starts to go 60-40 Zeke, which we've seen in the past that Tony Pollard can outscore Zeke with 40 to 60%. So he can be in your lineup, but don't be surprised if you're watching on Thursday and Zeke, gets a few more carries. And then next week he gets a few more carries as he quote unquote becomes the lead back again.
Yeah, and I mean, that is definitely something to monitor, but early in the season, Zeke was definitely getting the 60-40, maybe you could even argue 70-30 over Pollard, and yet Pollard was still putting up uh, double-digit points in at least 4 games in the first 6, so definitely something worth monitoring, but I think Pollard at this point is getting way too valuable. Plus, Zeke is limited in practice again after this week. I feel like they're going to use it as an excuse to get him up to speed and keep giving Pollard his chances. Either way, I think Pollard is the main guy in the passing game at this point. The best case scenario would be that Zeke and Pollard both get utilized enough that they are both every week starters. And I say that best case scenario for fantasy managers because it gives you 2 usable running backs. Obviously, if you only own one of them, it's not best case scenario for you, but uh, Zeke still got 17 despite Pollard breaking 30. So both guys might honestly be very good plays moving forward. This week against the Giants, Giants do have a better defense than people give them credit for. So these guys might get limited a little bit, but I would still start both of them. Also on the Cowboys side, Cody, how you feeling about Dalton Schultz and these Cowboys receivers?
Yeah, I'd say Schultz is a startable tight end just because of what the landscape is. I like CD Lamb as well. I do want to go real quick to back to Tony Pollard, and we talked a little bit about trade deadlines and this week. And he's a guy that if you can flip, take these last 3 weeks and really flip into like a bona fide number one, you don't have to worry about Zeke. Like if you could package him with a receiver and go get an Austin Eckler or a Jonathan Taylor or something. Sorry, George, I just named all of your guys and you were talking trades with Snyder earlier, so maybe I'm giving you guys some deals. Uh, but he has the Eagles, Titans, and Washington for that championship stretch one. And we talked about how good those defenses have been against running backs. So that's also some stuff to look forward to is if you're, looking like you're in a playoff spot this last week of trades, kind of like pick your playoff matchups and try to acquire some players that way as well.
Yeah, I think that wraps up the Cowboys side of the ball. Now we can move on to the Giants, where it's another week of how are the Giants going to look like a good team and still have no one fantasy relevant? Saquon Barkley. Anyone else?
No.
Danny Dimes honestly has been doing enough with his legs to still be fantasy startable, but in this matchup, I don't think I would be playing Danny Dimes. He's been mainly a pickup for teams that have like Kyler Murray, who has been out. I feel like Kyler should return next week, so you're not going to run out and play him.
I think you can play, as I heard them call him on the broadcast, Vanilla Vic, which I thought was a very interesting name. But that's what apparently the Giants call him, Vanilla Vic. So you can roll. I think you can still roll Vanilla Vic out there because of his damage he does with his legs.
I feel like that sounds a little bit too edgy for this podcast. I think Danny Fullback is what I'm going to stick with personally, but whatever you want to do, go for it. I think those are the last two on the Giants. We can move on to the last game on Thanksgiving. The nightcap is the New England Patriots traveling to the Minnesota Vikings. On the Viking side of the ball, Justin Jefferson was listed as a full participant in practice on Monday. He should be good to go as he was this past week. It was disappointing for him, but he seems to be a guy who's been a little bit up and down, but his ups are absolutely insane. Tough matchup. Jefferson's got to be in your lineup, and same with Dalvin Cook. TJ Hawkinson, just because of the tight end landscape. Anybody else?
Would you consider this a primetime game? Should we be worried about Kirk Cousins?
I was going to ask the exact same thing. Should I be playing Lil Kirko or not?
I don't think I
actually
would.
have a stat, though. He is not good in primetime, but he has a winning record on Thursdays.
Weird.
This is too
complicated. Yes, of all things.
Primetime football.
So Thursday is not primetime football. Thursday is a whole nother monster that makes teams play completely different than we're used to. Evidenced by primetime Kirk not being affected by prime time on a Thursday.
I don't get it.
Yeah, so like, here, I'm going to ask you guys this because would you play Kirk Cousins or Danny Fullback Thursday night? Because you got to pick one for Thursday.
I'll go Danny fullback, just because both are in against tough defenses, and I'll take the guy who is more mobile.
I don't know. Kirk Cousins is shredded, man. Like, I want to look down on Kirk Cousins, but after seeing those abs, I'm like, maybe he's better than I thought. I don't know. I think I'd go with Cousins just because they are both playing top defenses, and I feel like Cousins at least has the weapons. I do understand that Vanilla Vic has the legs, but Lil Kirko has the weapons, and I feel like you got to side with that.
All right. Well, I would go. I'd go Danny Dimes
Tiebreaker
for that. I would go Danny Dimes. Bring that nickname back. Maybe that's just a little biased on the Vikings only putting up 3 points, the Patriots shutting down the Jets. So I think it's close. I think that was definitely a coin flip. But speaking of the Patriots side, Ramondre Stevenson, and then their defense probably. Anything else like on the Patriots side?
Man, even Nick Folk was like a good play before this week. He was one of the top kickers in fantasy, and then he finished in the negatives with the missed extra points or missed field goals this week. Like, even you can't even play their kicker. Like, it's getting bad.
It was such a weird week too, because like the other top two kicker so far was Graham Gano, and he had 2 extra points missed this week. Like, kickers are a whole nother monster too. That you're still probably going out there and rolling out Gano and Folk, but I get it. That was tough.
Yeah, I think that that wraps up the Thursday night preview. I'm not gonna lie, I am not thrilled about this slate. I feel like the first game is going to be a blowout, and then the other 2 games, I like the Dallas
Do not
Giants
underestimate the Thanksgiving Detroit Lions.
Okay.
Look, the Detroit Lions really aren't that bad to begin with. Like, they put up enough points. Like, they're not a fantastic football team, but they still put up points.
Yeah, they put up. This is the game that I think they could get blown out. Now the Bills haven't looked. They didn't look great last week, but how much of that was like having to move everything to Detroit last minute and all the stuff that comes with that. But they're the team that can get out on this defense that I think could really hit the Lions. I mean, cool if the Lions want to make it a game and make the slates good. Definitely not looking forward to the Thursday night primetime Kirk versus Mac Jones snooze fest that we're going to get. So luckily I'll be full from Thanksgiving food. But before we go, I have to ask this question. What is the best Thanksgiving side dish?
Stuffing.
Ew.
Of all the things that comes with Thanksgiving, you say stuffing.
I'm going mashed
You said
potatoes
side
with gravy.
dish specifically.
Well, if you're a longtime listener of this show, you know my answer. It's mac and cheese. And George,
mac and cheese.
You can suck it. It's a side at Thanksgiving.
I never disagreed with you about Thanksgiving mac and cheese going together, but like from year one, you have always told me like, "Oh yeah, no, it's a side, George." I've never once argued.
Mashed potatoes with gravy, guys. That's the best side dish for Thanksgiving.
Okay, we're gonna have to have a conversation off air. I'm gonna pull the records of Thanksgiving food draft where you told me I wasn't allowed to take mac and cheese, but that's a topic for next year's Thanksgiving. As always, we want to thank you for listening, especially on Thanksgiving weekend. We are super thankful for everyone that gives us a listen, reaches out and all that, because we love doing this podcast, but it's you guys that we do it for.
Yeah, and let us know what your favorite Thanksgiving side dish is. Let us know why George's an idiot for picking stuffing and how there's so many better options. Like, you might as well have said cranberry sauce. Like, just horrible
I would have roasted you for that if you actually would have said that.
But either way, let us know what you like about this podcast. Let us know what you'd like us to add, change. Let us know who you are trying to pick up on the waiver, or just reach out to us with questions, who you should pick up, who you should trade. Let us help you win a championship. Either way, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Yeah, thank you one more time for listening to the Couch GMs podcast. Enjoy family, enjoy football, enjoy food on Thanksgiving. And from all of us here at the Couch GMs, thank you one more time for listening in. For Tyler Snyder, Cody Roadcap, and George Kerth, and we'll see you all this week on Friday.
Boom.